Welcome to Vermontitude, a collaborative effort between Great Eastern Radio, the Brattleboro Reformer, and BCTV to bring you the stories behind the stories on the topics you want to learn more about. Because there's always more, so there'll always be Vermontitude. Hosted by me, Peter Fish Case. Welcome to Vermontitude. New episodes drop every Tuesday and can be found by going to Vermontitude.com, Reformer.com, Brattleboro.tv, and locally on Comcast Channel 1078. We come to you from our studios at the Innovation Box on Landmark Hill. I'm Peter Fish Case, and each week I cover the topics that are of concern to Windham County and the towns that reside within its borders. Joining us today from the Restorative Community Practice of Vermont, founder, now volunteer, Dan DeWalt. Welcome.
Thanks.
All right, so let's get right into it. For those folks who might not understand what restorative practices are or justices, can you just give us a kind of the Reader's Digest version?
Sure. Restorative practice, more people may be familiar with the term restorative justice, but restorative practice we use more now because justice has its own baggage of meaning, and we like to keep things clear, is where when there's conflict, when people are in conflict, we work with the people to really help them figure out individually what's going on with them. Why were they so pissed off? What got them so upset? What was this about? And we do that with a one-on-one interview, and we ask them a bunch of questions, and all the questions are about themselves. It's like they can blame a lot of other people, and they can say, this person was this or that and the other thing. But what you get down to is when people are upset, it's because there's something they need they're not getting. And when restorative practice, we use nonviolent communication. There are different ways of doing restorative practice. Our particular organization, because one of my coworker is a really expert person in nonviolent communication, we found that works really well to help people get to the bare bones of what's going on with them. So by asking them about their emotions and what drove their emotions and what they need, we figure out what are the universal needs. I mean, everybody needs shelter. Everybody needs food. Everybody needs affection, communication, companionship. Those are things which you can't deny, say, oh, that's ridiculous. You don't need that. So if you get people boiled down to what their individual needs are and the things that aren't being met or the things they really value that are not happening for them, and they're in conflict, then when they're having a conversation with the person they were in conflict with, they're able to talk about those things and they can really understand each other. So we will work with, say there's 3 people in a conflict, we will work with each one of those people individually until they can really express themselves about themselves and not be throwing a lot of blame around. Then we bring them into the same room and ask them those exact same questions and have them do that same thing so everybody in the room can hear it. So now everybody in the room who was in conflict hears the other person's story, what it was like, what their reality was. And at that point, then we facilitate a conversation, they speak to each other, they express understanding of where they are having heard these things, and then they come up with strategies. And we don't judge, we don't arbitrate, we don't mediate, we simply facilitate the conversations, and we keep people focused on their own selves. And it's kind of a magical thing. It really works. People, when they go through a circle and they do the adequate work, when the initial conversations are called intakes, not all the time, but pretty much most of the time, people are able to understand why they were so upset and what they needed, and they're often able to come up with a strategy to meet those needs. So years ago, I used to teach at Leland and Gray, and a principal brought it there, and we started doing it, and it's just made so much sense. And
right.
It actually, I had done those kinds of things in my woodworking class just by instinct, not knowing anything. And since I've started doing this, it's maybe, 10 years or something, I've been doing it. It's just so clear that working in dealing with conflict like this, you build trust. You build connections with the people that you're trying to, fix a conflict for, like in the case of, say, being a teacher.
Right.
Instead of building this wall between you and the bad kid, you break down that wall and you get to know the kid and you have a connection and a relationship, and you can help that kid can guide his own way through troubled waters
Sure.
with the school's approval and assistance, and not in spite of the school, but because of the school. So,
Right. So I've always sort of taken a look at this approach, and I've always appreciated it, because the number one thing I think that we forget as human beings is we have no idea what's going on in each other's lives.
Yep.
And what, brought us to that point on that given day at that given moment, and, that triggered something. And so these conversations are really important, but you're sort of, you're executing these behaviors, these strategies on a high school level and beyond. I mean, how does that work for kids? I mean, kids are, they don't have that sort of greater understanding at that point. So do you find that's a benefit or a hindrance?
Well, high school kids are very aware when someone's feeding them a line of bull. Yeah. And they're very aware when someone's being real or not being real. And this work is really very real. So when what I taught was a hand woodworking class, one class a day for 27 years. And a lot of kids who take that class, not all of them, but a lot of them really don't like school. And it was the first period in the morning. It was one way they could start school, and they could, they could function in that class. But, some days they come into school, they could have been, on somebody else's house on a couch. There were, I don't want to go into any details, but there were so many terrible things happen to my kids.
Yeah.
And so they come in and they were not really prepared to function well.
Sure.
And so I've had plenty of kids just like lose it in a big way. And most teachers have this feeling, especially I think when you're a younger teacher, you're like, oh my God, I can't lose face. If I lose face, I've lost control of my classroom.
Right.
And that's not true. When you give a kid space and you say, wow, okay, you are having a hard time today. We're not going to solve this right now. Why don't you take a little time, whether it's here in this room or go to the library, we'll come back to this. And not like, get thee to the principal, but I understand I don't understand why you are having this meltdown today, but I understand that something is really going on, and I need to honor that and figure out how to deal with it. And right now is not the time, because you are elevated up to here.
Right.
I'm elevated up to here.
Right.
Even though I'm trying not to show it. So then the next day they come into class and say, hey, come on over. Let's talk about this. And invariably, like that, the day after, they were like, oh yeah. And they might have an explanation. They might just not, but at any rate, we can have a conversation about it, and we can figure out, how do we strategize? So it's not about what punishment should I give you now for swearing. Oh my God, he swore at me. Well, yeah, that's bad, but it's just a thing. And so it's not about how are we going to punish you for that? It's like, what do we need so you can come into school and not melt down and do this. So the kids, not, of course, in all these things, we do these things with adults too, and it's a variable. But the vast majority of kids really respond to this and I've had multiple times the people who are quote unquote the perpetrators, the person that caused the trouble,
sure.
Which we don't even use those terms. We're like, we talk about actors and those being acted upon. And you ask them, one of the things we ask is like, what were you feeling at the time? And what are you needing? And I've had multiple people say, nobody has ever asked me that question, ever.
Right.
Like a kid who's been in trouble 7,000 times in the school system from like second grade on up. Nobody's ever asked them that question. It's like, how can that even be? And it's because we're not trained to do that. We're trained as a culture to follow the rules, mete out punishment.
Like a cause and effect.
Yeah, exactly. And that's not how things really work. So school kids, elementary kids, adults, I don't see any one group being less inclined to be able to do this work than any other group. But with the high school kids, it definitely can work. Right now I'm working with a small group of Leland and Gray students, trying to get them trained. We did some training last spring, and they're like a crew, and we're trying to do restorative circles and intakes with them up at the high school. I'm going up as a volunteer and as needed. And Brattleboro has a great program. John Kersey runs the restorative program at the high school, and Ann Conlure, that's probably the bad pronunciation of her last name, is setting up a middle school program, and we're actually working with both of those guys also. And it's the potential for what it can do for schools is just huge.
So is the idea for Dan DeWalt Volunteer to constantly be there, or are we trying to train the kids on how to sort of do this on the fly within the moment and understand it?
Well, Dan DeWalt Volunteer would like to stay home and play the piano and trombone and dig in the dirt.
Yeah.
So we're definitely trying to get it over to the kids to be able to handle it. And that's really right now it's about kids, there's a trouble, and with me helping, they do an intake and then they do the circle. And that's what we're building right now. But really what we're trying to become is a restorative school where things like this are just taken in stride at the moment. And we've had I think we've had a half a dozen teachers from Leland Gray take our trainings over the last couple of years. And a couple people who work at John and another person that works at Brattleboro have taken it. And it just becomes a way of being like the teachers who have done it at Leland Gray, and even some of the teachers who haven't done the training but I've worked with a bunch up there over my years. They realize this is just the way to be. So when things happen, we don't elevate it. We calm it down.
Right.
We get curious. The key word for me in this whole thing of work is curiosity. It's genuine curiosity. I'm really wondering, why are you throwing that brick through the window? That's a pretty severe thing. I'm really curious. That's, and I'm genuine. I am. I'm not just saying it because it's words that I know work to calm people down. It's I am curious. And if you have an open curiosity without a bunch of judgment laden behind it, you give people an opportunity to explore what's happening for them in a different way. And by not having judgment too, that's a whole, when you jump ugly on somebody and you insult them or you put them down or whatever, in our brain, we actually, things happen and parts of our brains shrink. You can actually shrink someone's brain down by trauma and abuse to the point where parts of the brain that they need for empathy are just really small. And every time you give someone actual empathy, so it's not, you don't have to be sympathetic, you don't have to be taking their cause, you're just listening, genuinely curious and listening to them, you literally help grow healthy parts of their brain back again.
Right.
Thank God for science. Because if science hadn't, measured this with some kind of a measuring stick, we couldn't say that. We could say it, but nobody would believe us. But now science is actually, you can look up the studies and you can find out that brains get bigger when people give people empathy. So if you were just doing that on a regular basis as a teacher with kids, as with trouble come up, everything becomes de-escalated to a degree. Obviously things still happen.
Right.
But when your general tendency is to escalate, things go south. Or actually, I should probably say, things go north. When you think about that expression.
Yeah.
Things go north. Things
they
go worse.
Escalate. Yeah. What's the old Walt Whitman thing? Be curious, not judgmental.
Oh, yeah?
Yeah.
Didn't know that.
So, yeah. So there's that's what this whole thing reminds me of, and especially with that. Dan, so we're sort of coming to a close of our time, but if you wanted folks to know any one thing about the restorative community practice of Vermont, what would you tell them?
Well, if you have any conflicts, we do conflict resolution work and circles for free. If you are interested in doing this work, we do trainings. Nowadays they're on Zoom. We might resume in person at some point. Typically in the fall and in the spring. Right now we're doing an NVC training, and in the spring we'll do a circle facilitation training. And those can be free. We ask people to contribute, but you don't have to.
Right.
It's pretty important to us that this work happens. More important than.
How do they get a hold of you? How do they find out about you?
rcpvermont.org is our website, and there you can just hit contact and send your request or your interests or whatever, and we'll
make sure a link's put in the thing. Hey, really appreciate you coming and talking. I always feel like this is really super important work. I thank you for doing it. I thank you for spearheading it, along with other great organizations in our area that are doing some of the same work. Yeah,
the Community Justice Center, which their docket is a little bit different, but they have branched out now, and they have people actually doing the same thing. That used to be that they didn't do, like if you had a personal conflict, like you had to find us somehow.
Right.
And now they do that also. So it's growing. more schools are doing it. A really important thing we're trying to do is to get the legislature to make competency in restorative practices a requirement for a Vermont teaching requirement, teaching license.
Yeah.
So if anybody has any inroads to any particular legislatures, let me know, because we need to get them on our side and get that happening.
All right. Dan DeWalt, thanks for jumping on the program.
You're welcome. Thanks for having me.